Yeah, well, as we come to chapter 18 of the Screwtape letters, inevitably it was going to come where we come to talk about sex. But again, Wormwood is told, even a slub gob, you must have learned at college the routine technique of sexual temptation, and since for us spirits, this whole subject is one of considerable tedium, I will pass it over. He says, but the larger issues involved, I think you have a good deal to learn. Again, the idea of the sexual temptation, as much as people tend to focus on it so much in our world, is really for the devils and just kind of one of those things. It's just kind of tedium. But he talks about some of the background to it. What is some of the background that's involved? He says the enemy's demand on humans takes the form of a dilemma, either complete abstinence or unmitigated monogamy. We have to realize that either of those things still fall under the same category. Both of those things are what we describe as chastity. When we talk about chastity, it's not meant to talk about simply abstaining from sexual relations. No, chastity is living out your sexuality appropriately for your state in life. If you're not married, which would include those who are religious, the priests, things like that, if you're unmarried, then it's going to mean that, abstaining from sexual relations. If you're married, it means those sexual relations that are only within the context of marriage and having certain criteria that, we'll talk about here in a little bit. See two things in here. One of them is they talk about these days FOMO, fear of missing out. People cannot abide the fact that they have to make a choice of one thing or another, because they're always afraid that, well, if I pick one thing, then I can't pick the other thing. I want everything that I want it all right now. I can't wait. I can't be denied anything. I want all of it. The other thing is, somebody once said this, it's a line that I heard, I forget where. They said the American approach to life is not so much, I need to win, as much as I need to win and everybody else needs to lose. Again, that idea that one gains and another loses. And again, this isn't the idea that comes from God. The idea that would come from God is we're all in this together. We're all able to do it. That's explained in the next paragraph. Now, the enemy's philosophy is nothing more or less than one continued attempt to evade this very obvious truth. He aims at a contradiction. Things are to be many, yet they are somehow to be one. The good of oneself is to be the good of another. Again, our definition of love is willing the good of the other. The world's definition is what makes me happy. I guess I use the classic example of the phraseology people would say of, I love my car. And if people think about love as being possessive, that's the way a lot of people approach it, that the love of a human being is, how does this person fulfill me? How does this person give to me? How does this person make me happy? Rather than worrying about, what am I doing to fulfill the other person? What am I doing for the good of the other person? That, for us, is the idea of love. Again, we see one of those lies of Screwtape, or just the way that the devils would see things. This impossibility he calls love. They don't think it's possible. God thinks it's possible of us. We always have to remember that. He says, this impossibility he calls love, and the same monotonous panacea can be detected under all he does and even all he is or claims to be. He is not content, even himself, to be a sheer arithmetical unity. He claims to be three as well as one. In order that this nonsense about love may find a foothold in his own nature. Again, we describe God as love. It wouldn't really be possible for God to be love without God being a Trinity. Of those three persons of the Trinity, in eternal relationship, eternally in love. Then Screwtape says, at the other end of the scale, he introduces into matter that obscene invention, the organism, in which the parts are perverted from their natural destiny of competition and made to cooperate. It's that idea of everybody working together, all the parts working together. It's not self-survival, it's not every man for himself, it's the common good that we often talk about. That common good that I often say has been lost in our political world so often. It's the idea that we're not here for competition, we're not here to destroy one another, we're here to work together and help raise each other up to a higher level. Wormwood is told by Screwtape his God's real motive for fixing on sex as the method of reproduction among humans is only too apparent from the use he has made of it. Sex might have been, from our point of view, quite innocent. Again, this is innocent in the devil's terms. It might have been merely one more mode in which a stronger self preyed upon the weaker, as it is indeed among the spiders, where the bride concludes her nuptials by eating her groom. But in the humans, the enemy has gratuitously associated affection between the parties with sexual desire. Yet it's interesting to think about, the idea of sexuality. I always comment the fact that people often say, why is the Catholic Church so down on sexuality? Well, we're not. We are really keen on what sexuality is supposed to be. We really hold that up as the example, that it is meant to be between the man and the woman in marriage as a sign of unity, but also open to the procreation of children. That sex has an incredible power, that it can be a part of the sharing of the creative power of God. And because of that, it needs certain parameters, because it is such a powerful thing. It is the world that has decided that any parts of that don't need to be a part of it. It's by withdrawing any parts from it needing to be inside marriage, or being able to use contraception, or anything like that along the way, that has really made it into far less than it's supposed to be. We hold marriage up so high that people maybe just can't see it, that they think we're really down on it, but what we're down on is the abuse of what it is, of what the world has made it into. The church is not bad about sexuality. It doesn't see it as something bad. It sees it as something so extremely good. It's just that the world doesn't want to live up to those standards. So you could probably say, that the world is more likely to throw rocks at the stained glass window because it's complaining that it can't see through it, because it just sees what is there. And so, again, that's the difference of how the world sees sexuality and how the church sees it. Screwtape is told, he has also made the offspring dependent on the parents and given the parents an impulse to support it, thus producing the family, which is like the organism, but only worse. For the members are more distinct, yet also united, in a more conscious and responsible way. The whole thing, in fact, turns out to be simply one more device for dragging in love. Again, this is why we see the family as the basic building block of society. Ideally, mother, father, children. That is what we identify as being the basic building block of society and the basic building block of the church. Again, because it is in that working together, that relationship, that people are able to find that love. I admit, not every family works out in that same way. I saw plenty of that in my years at the tribunal, to be sure. But again, because if you're opening up a box of light bulbs and one of them is broken, you don't throw out the whole box and say, none of these are going to work. We can't just go from the broken and say, okay, it doesn't work at all. Even though many of our experiences might be from brokenness, but we still see that core idea of the family. Again, even we see this reflected in Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, the Holy Family. That is the core building block of our society. We are told, now comes the joke. The enemy described the couple as one flesh. He did not say a happily married couple or a couple who married because they were in love. But you could make the humans ignore that. Again, that idea that there is one flesh in marriage, that this is my other self. And because of that, it really isn't something that you just say, I'm leaving because I'm not receiving what I think I should. It'd be like, cutting off a part of your body simply because you're not happy about the way things are. To say, well, I don't like the way this feels, so I'm cutting off my hand. It makes no sense. You can make them forget that man they call Paul did not confine it to married couples. Mere copulation for him makes one flesh. You can thus get humans to accept as rhetorical eulogies of being in love that were in fact plain descriptions of the real significance of sexual intercourse. The truth is, whenever a man lies with a woman, whether they like it or not, a transcendental relation is set up between them, which they must be eternally enjoyed or eternally endured. From the true statement that this transcendental relation was intended to produce, and if obediently entered into, often will produce affection and the family, humans can be made to infer the false belief that the blend of affection, fear, and desire, which they call being in love, is the only thing that makes marriage either happy or holy. Again, we see the two things playing out here. One of them is a truth that many people want to deny in our world today. That to have sexual relations with another person establishes some sort of connection. There is some sort of change. The things that we were reading about in psychology and physiology tell us, especially for women, if women are going to have sex with somebody, they often think that this is the person that I'm going to be with for the rest of my life. And that's the danger, especially of this promiscuity that's so often out there in our world today. Is it's really, in a way, establishing, a relation that seems to promise something so much greater, but if one or both the parties really aren't interested in that, it leaves them frustrated. It frustrates the nature of what sexuality is all about. The other idea is that idea, again, that this is all about being in love. Oh, this is perfectly okay. We're in love. We're in love. We can live together. We're in love. We can have sex outside of marriage. That, our world is claiming that justification of being in love is the ultimate reason for doing anything. And again, more often than not, it's the being in love that says, this is what fulfills me. He said that this error is easily produced because being in love does very often in Western Europe precede marriages which are made in obedience to the enemy's designs, that is, with the intention of fidelity, fertility, and goodwill. Again, those are some of the basic things of what the reasons for marriage, of what they're all about. A marriage is supposed to be faithful, it's supposed to be fertile, and it's supposed to be for the good of the parties involved. When I worked with annulments, if we found one of these things was missing, we could declare the marriage invalid. We could grant an annulment if somebody really showed in their life, okay, I never really intended to be faithful to my spouse, or I never intended to have children in the marriage, or I was really in this just to control the other person and not wish what is good for them. That becomes reasons for an annulment. We are told, they regard the intention of loyalty to a partnership for mutual help, for the preservation of chastity, for the transmission of life, as something lower than a storm of emotions. Again, this is what marriage is supposed to be about. It isn't just about the feelings. It isn't about, what's going to make me happy. There are certain things that the church describes marriage of, this is what marriage is really supposed to be. I like to think about, the idea, as much as our world looks down on it so much, arranged marriages. But at one time it was fairly common. In some societies it may still exist. But our world can't fathom that idea of not marrying somebody because I've fallen madly in love with this person. But yet they often say that those marriages have a greater success rate. because these people have to learn to love one another. Again, it doesn't start off from the emotion, which drops off, and then you have to learn. It kind of starts from ground zero, and from there, you have to learn. Again, I'm not necessarily making, the claim that we should all have arranged marriages, but it is interesting to see how the success of those marriages has come about as the couple willfully choose to learn to know each other and to love each other, rather than just going from being in love. As I said earlier, Screwtape concludes this letter. In the second place, any sexual infatuation, whatever, so long as it intends marriage, will be regarded as love, and love will be held to excuse a man from all the guilt and to protect him from all the consequences of marrying a heathen, a fool, or a wanton. But more of that in my next. Again, we just see that sometimes I'm in love and people don't make any real, saw this too much in the tribunal. I'm so madly in love that they never bothered to really look at the other person and see, who is this person? What's going on? One of the classic lines we would see was, oh, I knew he was doing drugs, but I figured he was going to stop once we got married. Or, I saw that this behavior was problematic, or I didn't like that much, but, I figured once we got married, that would go away. And of course, it didn't. So again, thank you for being with me today as we're looking at this chapter of the Screwtape letters. Again, there's a lot in here. If there's any questions, email me. I'll do my best to answer them.